The rain had been falling all afternoon, turning the busy city streets into rivers of gray. Cars splashed through puddles, horns echoed through the wet air, and people hurried under umbrellas trying to escape the downpour. It was one of those evenings when the sky looked heavy, and everything felt a little colder than usual. Outside a small noodle stall tucked between tall buildings, a man in a dark coat stepped out of a sleek black car. He didn't look like someone who would eat by the street. His shoes were shiny, his watch expensive, and his face calm in a way that came from years of success. He had finished another long day at his company, full of meetings and phone calls that decided where money moved and who got richer. For him, this stall was only a stop while waiting for the rain to slow down. He stood under the edge of the stall's roof, checking his phone, the smell of broth and noodles mixed with the sound of rain hitting the ground. He ordered a bowl quietly, not really hungry but wanting something warm. As he waited, he noticed movement near the edge of the road. A small figure stood under a broken umbrella that barely covered her shoulders. It was a young girl, maybe 12 or 13. Her clothes were thin, too thin for a night like this, and her shoes were worn down at the toes. Her hair was wet and stuck to her cheeks. She was holding a few coins in her small hand, looking nervously toward the stall owner. The man watched as she walked up to the counter. Her voice was soft and shaky, almost lost under the rain. "Please, mister, can I have a small bowl of noodles?" "Just one," she said, pushing the coins forward. The stall owner looked at her with pity but shook his head. "Sorry, little one," he said kindly. "That's not enough. Prices have gone up. I can't do it for less." The girl stared at the coins for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly and stepped back. She didn't argue, didn't beg again. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on the steaming bowls other people were eating. Her stomach made a small sound that only she could hear. The man in the dark coat kept watching. Something inside him shifted. He was used to seeing people in need. In this city, you saw it every day. Usually he turned away. He told himself there was nothing he could do, that everyone had to take care of themselves. But that night, for reasons he couldn't explain, he couldn't look away. His own bowl arrived, the broth still steaming. He didn't touch it. He kept glancing toward the girl standing in the rain. Her hands were shaking from the cold, and she tried to hold her umbrella tighter, but one of the metal ribs had snapped. The rain kept dripping onto her shoulder, soaking her sleeve. Finally, he sighed, put down his phone, and walked toward the counter again. "Give her a bowl," he said simply. The stall owner looked surprised. "You mean the little girl?" "Yes, give her a bowl of whatever she wants. I'll pay for it." The girl's head turned quickly. She looked up at the man with wide eyes. "Sir, I don't want to bother you," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to buy something for my mother. She's not feeling well." "It's no bother," he replied quietly. "Go ahead. Get the noodles." The stall owner smiled and began preparing the bowl. The girl hesitated for a second, as if she couldn't believe it was really happening. Then she whispered a shy "thank you" and took a step closer to the warmth of the stall. While she waited, she kept glancing at the man, unsure if she should say more. The rain was still coming down hard, beating against the metal roof, but the small area under the stall felt a little brighter. Steam rose from the pot, and the smell of garlic and soy filled the air. When the noodles were ready, the stall owner placed the bowl in front of her. She looked at it as though it was something precious. Her hands shook slightly as she picked up the chopsticks. She didn't sit. There were no seats left, but she stood quietly, eating in small, careful bites. The man noticed she wasn't eating like someone who just loved noodles. She was eating like someone who hadn't had a full meal in a while. Every bite looked like it mattered. Halfway through, she stopped and covered the bowl with her small hand as if saving the rest. "Why don't you finish it?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled. "I want to bring some for my mom," she said. "She's sick." "We stay near the old market. She hasn't eaten since morning." The man didn't know what to say. He'd heard many stories before. People on the streets always had reasons, and he had trained himself to stay cautious. But something about her voice was different. There was no act in it, no hint of trickery. Just honesty. Just a child trying to care for her mother. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She hesitated. "Lena," she said finally. "Well, Lena," he replied, "your mother is lucky to have you." She gave a small smile, the first one of the night. It was shy but full of light, even in the rain. When she finished, she carefully wrapped what was left in a piece of paper the stall owner gave her. She thanked him again, then looked back at the man. "Thank you for helping me," she said. "I'll pay you back someday." "I promise," he almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he knew how impossible that promise sounded. Still he nodded. "Don't worry about that," he said. "Just take care of your mother." The girl bowed slightly, holding the warm noodles close to her chest, and ran off into the rain. Her umbrella flipped backward in the wind, but she didn't stop. She just kept running. The man stood there for a while, watching until she disappeared around the corner. Something heavy sat in his chest, a strange feeling that didn't go away. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something else. He turned back to his own bowl. The noodles had gone cold. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have the appetite to eat. He left the stall quietly, leaving a few extra bills on the counter. The stall owner called after him, "Sir, you gave too much." But he just waved a hand without turning around. When he reached his car, the driver hurried to open the door, but he stopped for a moment, standing in the rain without his umbrella. The city lights reflected on the wet road, blurring into streaks of color. He watched people rush by, umbrellas, taxis, neon signs, 1,000 lives moving fast. And in the middle of it all, he thought of that little girl, running through the storm with a bowl of noodles in her hands. Inside the car, it was warm and quiet. The driver asked, "Oh, home, sir?" "Yes," he said softly. As the car moved, he looked out of the window, but the reflection that stared back didn't look as calm as usual. He had everything, the money, comfort, status, but tonight none of it made him feel good. The image of that small girl kept flashing in his mind. Her wet hair, her shaking hands, her determination to feed her sick mother. He thought about how different his life had become. There was a time long ago when he too had stood in the rain, hungry and waiting. But those memories had faded over the years, replaced by meetings, deals, and luxury. It was easy to forget. It was easy to believe that success erased the past. Until tonight. When the car stopped at a red light, he saw a reflection in a puddle, a man sitting in comfort, staring at a world he didn't understand anymore. For the first time in years, he felt small again, and strangely, he didn't hate the feeling. At home, he went straight to his study, but he couldn't focus. He poured himself tea, sat at his desk, and stared at the raindrops sliding down the window. Somewhere out there, that girl and her mother were eating a warm meal because he decided to stop for noodles instead of driving straight home. It was such a small thing, yet it had changed something inside him. He didn't know it then, but that one simple act, buying a bowl of noodles for a stranger, would be the start of something much bigger. Something that would test who he really was, and what he truly valued in life. But for now, he just sat quietly listening to the rain, feeling a kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, the city woke up to clear skies. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, shining under the soft sunlight. The man sat by his window, staring at the cup of coffee on his table. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that little girl again, standing in the rain, clutching her broken umbrella and those crumpled coins. He tried to push the thought away. He had meetings lined up, people waiting for his decisions, numbers to analyze, reports to sign. His life was always full, always busy. But that morning, even the sound of his assistant's voice on the phone couldn't pull his mind back to work. As the day went on, he found himself distracted. During a meeting, while others discussed profits and expansion plans, his mind wandered back to the small noodle stall. He wondered if the girl had made it home safely, if her mother had eaten, if they were warm. He told himself it was foolish to think about strangers. He had done a small act of kindness. That should have been enough. But somehow it didn't feel enough. That evening, after his last meeting, he sat quietly in his car and told his driver to take him somewhere. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. He paused. "Back to the noodle stall," he said. The driver gave him a surprised look through the mirror, but didn't ask questions. The car rolled through the streets as the city lights flickered on one by one. The same familiar stalls were there, the same smell of food, the same sound of chatter and laughter. But this time the girl was nowhere to be seen. He stepped out and went to the stall owner, who recognized him right away. "Ah, sir, you're back," the man greeted with a smile. "The rain's gone today. Maybe you'll finally enjoy your noodles. The man smiled faintly. Actually, he said, I was wondering about that little girl from yesterday, the one who asked for noodles. The stall owner nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. Oh, her? Poor child. She comes by sometimes, but not every day. She lives not far from here, down near the old market. Her mother's been sick for a while. The girl tries to earn a few coins by collecting bottles or asking for spare change. I sometimes give her leftovers when I can. Do you know exactly where she stays? The man asked. The stall owner hesitated. In one of those old buildings near the market. Abandoned for years. She told me she stays on the second floor with her mother, but it's not a safe place. I told her that. The man's expression grew serious. Thank you, he said, placing some money on the counter. For the food, and for helping her when you can. He turned and started walking toward the market area. The path grew narrower, the lights dimmer. The scent of street food faded, replaced by damp air and the smell of rust and dust. The buildings looked tired, cracked walls, broken windows, graffiti everywhere. A few stray cats darted across the street. He found the building the stall owner had mentioned. The door was half broken, the hallway dark and cold. He climbed the creaky stairs, guided by the faint light from a small window. On the second floor, he saw a thin curtain hanging over a doorway. From inside came the faint sound of coughing. He stopped there, not wanting to frighten them. After a moment, he gently tapped on the wall. Hello? He called softly. Is anyone there? There was a pause. Then a small voice replied, Who is it? He recognized that voice immediately. It was the girl. It's me, he said quietly. The man from the noodle stall. The curtain moved slightly and Lena's face appeared, her eyes wide with surprise. Sir, what are you doing here? She asked. Her voice was full of confusion, but also a hint of happiness. I wanted to make sure you and your mother were all right, he said. Can I come in? She looked uncertain for a moment, then nodded and stepped aside. The room was small and nearly empty. The walls were damp, and the floor was covered with old blankets. A woman lay on a thin mattress near the window, her face pale, her breathing slow and weak. She tried to sit up when she saw him, but the effort made her cough. Please don't get up, he said gently, stepping closer. I'm just here to check on you. Lena rushed to her mother's side, helping her lean back against the wall. This is the man who bought us noodles yesterday, Mama, she said softly. The woman smiled faintly and whispered, Bless you, sir. Thank you for helping my daughter. We don't have much, but you gave her hope yesterday. He felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't used to hearing such words. In his world, people thanked him for deals and opportunities, not kindness. He knelt slightly beside her and said, How long have you been sick? Since last month, she answered weakly. I used to work at the laundry, but I can't stand much anymore. Lena has been trying to help us survive. We can't afford medicine. The man looked around the room. There was no stove, no proper bed, not even clean water. The few things they owned, a small pot, some old clothes, a broken chair, were neatly arranged. It was clear they lived with dignity, even in hardship. He reached into his pocket and took out an envelope. Please take this, he said. It's some money for food and medicine. I'll also send someone tomorrow to help take your mother to a clinic. The woman's eyes widened. Sir, we can't accept so much. You've already done enough. He shook his head gently. Sometimes when life gives us more than we need, it's only right to share it. You don't owe me anything. Lena stared at the envelope, then at him. Her eyes were filled with tears. Thank you, sir, she whispered. I'll study hard when Mama gets better. I'll make you proud someday. He smiled softly. That's all the thanks I need. After making sure they had food for the night, he quietly left the building. The cool night air hit his face, but he didn't feel cold. For the first time in a long while, his heart felt light. Back in his car, the driver noticed his expression. Everything all right, sir? Yes, he said slowly. Everything's fine. But deep inside, he knew something had changed. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. The cracked walls, the soft smile on the sick woman's face, the hope in the little girl's eyes. He had spent years building wealth, but that night made him realize how much of the world he had stopped seeing. The next day, he called his personal assistant. Find me a small medical center near the old market, he said, and arrange for one of our company's charity partners to cover expenses for a few families there. Quietly, I don't want publicity. His assistant was surprised but didn't question it. By the afternoon, arrangements were already in motion. Later that evening, he drove by the market again. This time, he stayed in the car and watched from a distance. He saw Lena walking back from a nearby store holding a loaf of bread and a bottle of water. She looked tired but happy. She stopped to help an older man pick up some dropped oranges before continuing on her way. Something about her kindness touched him deeply. She had so little, yet she still shared what she could. He wondered when he had stopped being that kind of person. He leaned back in his seat and whispered to himself, "Maybe she's the one helping me." Days passed, and he kept in touch with the clinic doctor to make sure the woman was improving. Each report brought better news. The medicine was working, and her strength was slowly returning. One evening, as he sat by his office window watching the sunset, his assistant entered the room with a hesitant smile. "Sir, I just wanted to say, that help you arranged for the families in the market area, it's starting to make a difference. People are talking about it. Quietly, but thankfully." He nodded, a small smile forming. "Good, let it stay that way. No cameras, no headlines." He didn't want recognition. For the first time, he realized kindness didn't need to be seen to matter. That night, he received a small letter delivered to his office. The handwriting was shaky but neat. It was from Lena. "Dear Sir," it read, "thank you for helping my mother and me. She can walk a little now and she smiles again. I'm going to school next week. I want to become a doctor one day so I can help others like you helped us. I don't have anything to give, but I drew a picture for you. It's us under the rain sharing noodles. Please keep it so you never forget us. Love, Lena." He stared at the letter for a long time. The drawing was simple, 2 figures under an umbrella, steam rising from a bowl. But it carried more warmth than anything money could buy. He placed it inside his drawer carefully, knowing it would stay there forever. He looked out at the city lights again. The same city, but now it felt different, more alive, more human. He realized that night that true wealth had nothing to do with the size of his house or the numbers in his bank account. True wealth was in moments like these, quiet, unspoken acts that healed more than one heart at a time. And somewhere, in a small corner of the city, a young girl and her mother were sleeping peacefully for the first time in months because one man, on one rainy evening, decided to stop and care. The morning sun spilled through the large windows of the man's office. The light touched the polished table, the framed awards, and the quiet hum of success that filled the room. But instead of feeling proud, he found himself staring at the little drawing pinned beside his computer, the one from the girl, with the umbrella and the bowl of noodles. It had been weeks since that rainy night. Her mother was now recovering, and the small medical help he had arranged had started supporting other struggling families near the old market. Still, something inside him kept stirring, a kind of restlessness that wouldn't fade. He had spent most of his life chasing numbers. Every achievement was followed by another goal, another deal, another step higher. But now, for the first time, he felt like he had climbed all the way to the top only to find silence waiting there. He turned away from his desk and looked at the city skyline outside the window. So many buildings, so many lives. He had lived in this city for years, yet he had never really seen it. That afternoon, during a meeting, one of his business partners was presenting a new investment plan. Everyone was nodding and talking about profit margins, but he wasn't listening. His mind drifted again, this time to the girl's letter. The way she had written, "I want to help others like you helped us," stayed with him. A child with nothing had still found a way to give back, even if it was through words. It made him realize that kindness, once shared, didn't stop. It spread. After the meeting, he walked out and told his assistant, "Cancel my appointments for the evening." The assistant blinked. "All of them, sir?" "Yes, I need some time outside the office." He didn't say where he was going. He just got in his car and told the driver to head toward the market again. When he reached the area, it was just before sunset. The streets were busy, full of vendors calling out their prices, people rushing home, children running barefoot. He recognized some faces now. The fruit seller who always smiled, the old man who sold second-hand books, and the noodle stall owner who greeted him warmly. "Good to see you again, sir," the stall owner said. "The little girl you helped came by earlier. Her mother's getting better thanks to you. They're both doing all right." "That's good to hear," the man replied with a smile. "She's a strong one." "She sure is," the stall owner agreed. Says she's going to school now. You know, sir, people here still talk about that day you helped her. Some of them started helping others too. Seems one small act got everyone thinking. The man nodded quietly. He didn't want attention, but hearing that his action had inspired others gave him a strange, warm feeling. He bought a bowl of noodles again, this time sitting at one of the small benches. Around him, the world felt simple. People laughed, shared food, argued, lived. It was messy and noisy, but full of life, something he had lost touch with. As he ate, he saw Lena walking with her school bag, the straps nearly worn out. She spotted him, stopped for a moment in disbelief, and then ran over. "Sir, you're here," she said excitedly. He smiled. "I told you I'd come back someday." She grinned, setting her bag down. "Mama says you're like an angel. She prays for you every day." He chuckled softly. "Tell your mother she doesn't have to do that." "I'm no angel, just someone who wanted to help." "But you did more than that," Lena said earnestly. "You made us believe good people still exist." Her words hit deeper than she knew. The man looked down at his bowl for a moment, then asked, "How's school?" "It's good," she said, sitting beside him. "It's hard, but I like it. I want to learn how to be a doctor. The teacher says I'm good at science, I'm sure you are," he said. "Keep studying. Don't ever give up on that dream." She nodded seriously. "I won't." They talked for a while, about her school, her friends, her mother's recovery. It felt natural, like talking to family. Before leaving, she handed him a small flower she had picked from the roadside. "For you," she said shyly. "Mama says flowers make people smile." He took it carefully, smiling in a way he hadn't in a long time. "Thank you, Lena." That night, he placed the small flower beside the drawing on his desk. It looked simple, almost out of place in his expensive office, but it meant more than all his awards combined. In the days that followed, he started thinking differently about his life. He began noticing things he had ignored before. The tired look on his driver's face, the janitor cleaning late into the night, the assistant who always stayed after hours without complaint. He began treating them with more kindness, a sincere thank you, a shorter workday, a meal shared instead of orders given. Slowly, the people around him noticed the change. One afternoon, his assistant approached him and said quietly, "Sir, you seem different lately, happier even. What changed?" He thought for a moment and said, "I remembered what it's like to be human again." The assistant didn't fully understand, but the words stayed with him. One weekend, the man decided to start something new, a small community project under his company's name, aimed at supporting children from low-income families with food and education. He called it the Warm Bowl Foundation. He didn't announce it to the media or hold big events. Instead, he quietly began funding it with his own savings. The first batch of children who received support were from the same market area. He made sure Lena and her mother were among them. When the first group of volunteers gathered, he stood before them and said simply, "This isn't charity. It's about sharing the warmth we all need. Sometimes one small act of care can change more lives than 1,000 big speeches." The volunteers nodded, inspired by his sincerity. Over the next few months, things began to grow naturally. Local vendors started donating meals. Teachers offered free tutoring on weekends. People from nearby neighborhoods came forward with clothes and school supplies. What began as one man's quiet decision was now turning into a community movement. One evening, as he visited the market again, the stall owner waved him over. "Sir, you've started something special here," he said. "You've given people hope again." The man smiled humbly. "It wasn't me. It was all of you. I just lit a small spark." As he turned, he saw Lena helping another child carry a heavy school bag. She stopped and waved at him. He waved back, feeling a quiet pride rise in his chest. Later that night, while driving home, he looked out at the city again. The same lights, the same noise. But this time, it all looked different. It wasn't just a city of business and money anymore. It was a city full of stories, full of people who could still care. When he reached home, he stood by the window holding the flower that had now dried. He thought about his own childhood, the nights he went hungry, the people who had helped him along the way. Maybe that's why Lena's story had touched him so deeply. It reminded him of who he used to be before life became all about success. He realized that what he had done for her wasn't a random act. It was life coming full circle. A few days later, he received a call from the clinic doctor. "Sir," the doctor said, "the woman you've been helping has recovered completely. She's looking for work again, and she asked me to tell you she's grateful. She said you gave her a second chance at life." He smiled quietly. "That's good news. Tell her she doesn't need to thank me, just to stay strong." That evening, he took a slow walk through the park near his home. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. Children laughed in the distance, and the sky turned gold as the sun dipped lower. He sat on a bench, breathing in the calm air, and for the first time in many years, he felt peace. He had spent half his life trying to prove something, that he could rise above his poor beginnings, that success would bring happiness. But now he knew the truth. Happiness didn't come from money or status. It came from connection, from kindness, from the quiet joy of helping someone stand when they've fallen. He looked up at the fading sky and whispered to himself, maybe this is what real success feels like. And somewhere across the city, a little girl named Lena was finishing her homework beside her smiling mother, both unaware that their small act of gratitude had changed the heart of a man who had once forgotten how to feel. Weeks passed, and the small foundation that started as a quiet idea began to grow faster than anyone expected. It wasn't just about money or charity anymore, and it was about people. Every day, someone new came forward wanting to help. Street vendors donated meals, teachers offered free lessons, doctors volunteered for health checks, and even strangers dropped by with old clothes or books. The man didn't seek attention, but the story somehow began to spread. It started with one small post online. The noodle stall owner had shared a photo of the man standing in the rain that first night, buying food for the little girl. He didn't post his name, but he wrote, "A stranger bought a bowl of noodles for a child in the rain." He didn't ask for thanks. He just cared. That's what the world needs more of. Within hours, people began sharing it. Some wrote comments saying how small acts of kindness could still change lives. Others shared their own stories. The post reached thousands, then millions. It became a symbol of hope in a time when people often walked past others without noticing. Soon, news reporters came looking for the man. They wanted to know who he was, what he had done, and why. But when they asked around, the stall owner only smiled and said, "He's just a kind man. That's all you need to know." When the man eventually found out that the story had gone viral, he was surprised. He had never wanted fame. For him, it was never about being seen. But deep down, he was happy that kindness itself had caught people's attention. Not his name, not his company, but the act itself. One afternoon, while sitting in his office, his assistant walked in holding a small stack of letters. "These came in for you, sir," she said. He looked up from his papers. "For me?" "Yes," she replied. "All from people who read the story. Some are from children, others from families. They wanted to thank you, even if they don't know your name." He smiled gently and took the letters. When he opened the first one, it was from a boy who wrote, "I helped my neighbor today because I read about the man who bought noodles for a girl. I want to be like him." Another letter said, "Your kindness reminded me of my father. He used to say small good deeds can light up a dark world." The man read each letter carefully, his eyes softening with each word. It amazed him how something so simple, one small act, had started touching hearts across the city. Later that week, he visited the market again. The familiar faces greeted him with warm smiles. The noodle stall owner waved from behind the counter. "Sir, looks like your kindness has made the news," he teased. The man laughed lightly. "I saw. The internet has a way of finding stories." Just then, he noticed a small crowd forming nearby. At the center stood Lena, holding a piece of paper and reading something aloud. A few children were listening closely. When he walked closer, he heard her voice, and the man said, "Kindness is the only thing that never runs out, even when money does." The children clapped when she finished. She smiled and turned around, then saw him standing there. Her eyes lit up and she ran to him. "Sir, did you hear me? I was reading the story we wrote in class about that night in the rain." "I heard," he said with a proud smile. "You did great," she laughed shyly. "The teacher said I should read it to everyone because it's real. She said kindness spreads when we talk about it." He nodded slowly. "Your teacher is right." Lena's mother, now healthy and standing strong, joined them. She smiled warmly. "Sir, I don't even know how to thank you anymore," she said softly. "You didn't just help us. You reminded everyone around us that caring still exists. The man waved it off gently. You've thanked me enough. Seeing you both smiling, that's all I need. That night, when he returned home, he found himself sitting quietly on his balcony, looking out at the city lights. He thought about everything that had happened. The rain, the noodles, the growing kindness, and how it had changed not only others but him as well. Before that rainy night, he had been surrounded by luxury, but inside he was empty. Now he felt full, not with wealth but with meaning. He realized something important. People often think change needs to be big, but real change begins in small ways. One gesture, one act of care, one bowl of noodles. A few days later, he was invited to speak at a local community event. At first, he didn't want to go. He wasn't used to giving speeches about feelings or life. But then he thought of Lena and the promise she had made, to study hard and help others someday. Maybe sharing his experience could inspire someone else to do the same. When he stood on the small stage, the audience went quiet. He looked at the faces before him. Students, workers, parents, children, all waiting to hear from the man whose simple kindness had gone around the world. He took a breath and said, I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who stopped for a moment when it was easier to keep walking. That night, I saw a little girl standing in the rain. I didn't change her life that day. She changed mine. People listened closely. Some smiled, others wiped away quiet tears. He continued, I had forgotten what kindness feels like. Real kindness. The kind that doesn't expect anything back. We live fast. We chase money, success, recognition. But sometimes we forget to look around. We forget that someone out there might just need a little help to stand again. He paused, then said softly, if you ever see someone struggling, don't just walk past them. Even the smallest act, and a smile, a meal, a kind word, can mean the world to someone. Kindness doesn't cost much, but it's worth everything. When he stepped off the stage, the audience clapped, not out of excitement, but out of genuine respect. Some even came forward to thank him, saying they would try to be better, to care more. That night, as he drove home, he received a message from Lena's teacher. It was a photo of Lena and her classmates holding a sign that read, One bowl of kindness, or pass it on. He smiled as he looked at it. The movement had grown beyond him now. It belonged to everyone. Over the following months, the Warm Bowl Foundation opened small centers across the city, each one providing food, education, and health care to families in need. What began as one night in the rain was now changing hundreds of lives, but through it all, the man remained humble. He rarely spoke about his role. When people asked him why he did it, he always said the same thing. Because once I was hungry too. One day, while visiting one of the new centers, he saw Lena again. She had grown taller, her uniform a little too big but neat and clean. She ran up to him carrying a small notebook. Sir, I wrote something for you, she said, smiling. He took the notebook and opened it. On the first page she had written, Kindness is like rain. It touches everyone, rich or poor, and makes the world bloom again. He looked at her with quiet pride. That's beautiful, he said. She grinned. It's true, isn't it? He nodded. It is. As he left the center that day, he realized how far they had all come. From that single moment under the rain to an entire wave of kindness that had touched countless hearts. He knew life would continue with its ups and downs, and not everyone would be kind. But he also knew that every act of goodness mattered. And even if he couldn't change the whole world, he had changed one small corner of it, and that was enough. That evening, when he got home, he looked at the drawing still hanging near his desk, the same one Lena had sent months ago. The colors had faded a little, but it was still full of warmth. He whispered softly, almost to himself, Thank you for standing in that rain, little one. You reminded me what life is really about. And somewhere in the city, as the night began to fall and lights flickered on, another person saw a stranger in need and decided to stop. To care, to share a small act of kindness. The ripple continued, just as it was meant to. Months turned into a year and life slowly moved forward. The city changed with time, but one thing remained. The story of a kind man who stopped in the rain to help a little girl. People still talked about it, not because it was dramatic, but because it reminded them of something simple. That kindness was still alive. The man never expected to become a symbol of generosity. He didn't want to be anyone's hero. All he ever wanted was to do something good when he saw someone suffering. Yet somehow that one small action had built something much bigger than he could have imagined. The Warm Bowl Foundation continued to grow. It wasn't about money. It was about connection. Volunteers came from different backgrounds. Some were students, others retired workers, some even people who had once been helped by the same program. They all shared one goal: to give back. Every week, the foundation hosted community meals in local parks. People from all walks of life would gather, not just to eat, but to talk, to share stories, and to remember that everyone deserved warmth and respect. One evening, as the man stood quietly at one of these events, he noticed Lena serving soup to an older woman. She had grown taller, her face brighter, her movements full of confidence. Her laughter echoed softly through the crowd. When she spotted him, her eyes lit up and she ran over, nearly spilling the soup in her excitement. "Sir, you came," she said with joy. He smiled gently. "Of course. I wanted to see how my best volunteer is doing." She laughed shyly. "I'm not the best. Everyone helps here. You are," he said kindly, "because you do it with your heart." She looked around the park. "Do you know what I love most about this place? Nobody feels poor here. Everyone just feels together." Her words made him pause. He looked at the faces around him, people laughing, sharing stories, and helping one another. For the first time, he truly felt that the city had changed, not because of money or fame, but because people had learned to care again. Later that night, as he walked back to his car, a young reporter approached him. "Sir, may I ask you something?" She said politely. He nodded. "Sure. People say you started a movement. They call you the man who changed the rainy night. How does that feel?" He smiled softly. "I didn't change anything. The truth is, kindness was always there. I just reminded people to notice it again." The reporter hesitated for a moment before asking, "If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?" He thought for a moment, then said quietly, "Never underestimate the power of one small good act. The world doesn't need more money or more fame. It needs more hearts that care." The reporter smiled. "That's beautiful." He nodded slightly. "It's simple, but it's real." A few days later, the foundation held a special event to celebrate its first anniversary. The park was decorated with small lanterns, each representing a story of kindness. Some were written by volunteers, others by children from nearby schools. When the man arrived, he was surprised to see a large banner that read, "One bowl of kindness, 1 year of hope." People from across the city had gathered. The noodle stall owner was there too, smiling proudly as he handed out food. He waved when he saw the man. "You started something big, my friend." The man laughed. "We all did." Then Lena stood on a small stage holding a microphone nervously. The crowd quieted down as she began to speak. Her voice trembled at first but grew stronger with each word. "Last year I was just a girl standing in the rain. I didn't have money and I didn't have hope. But someone stopped and saw me. He didn't walk away. Because of that, my life changed. I learned that even one small act can grow into something beautiful." The audience listened in silence. Some people had tears in their eyes. Lena continued, "Now I help others, not because I owe anyone, but because it feels right. And I think that's what kindness really means, and doing something good, even when no one is watching." The crowd clapped warmly. The man standing at the back felt a lump rise in his throat. He had seen her journey from that rainy night to this very moment, from a hungry child to a voice of hope. After the event ended, Lena found him again. She handed him a small box wrapped in plain paper. "This is for you," she said with a smile. He opened it carefully. Inside was a simple ceramic bowl, white with small blue lines painted around the edges. It looked like the kind used at street noodle stalls. He looked up at her, surprised. "It's beautiful." "It's from the same stall," she said softly. "The owner helped me make it. I wanted you to have it so you never forget how it started." He held the bowl gently, the memory of that rainy night flashing before his eyes. The cold air, the trembling hands, the warmth of that first bowl of noodles. He nodded slowly. "I'll keep it forever." Years went by. The man grew older and the city continued to change. Tall buildings rose where small shops once stood. Technology replaced many things, but the warmth of the foundation never faded. It had become a part of the city's heart, a reminder that no matter how fast life moved, Kindness should never be forgotten. Sometimes, he would still visit the parks quietly. He liked watching people share food, laugh together, or simply sit side by side without judgment. It reminded him why he started everything in the first place. One afternoon, he sat on a bench near the old noodle stall. The stall owner, now gray-haired but cheerful, came over with 2 bowls. "Still the best noodles in town," he said, setting one down. The man smiled. Just like before. They ate quietly for a while. The air smelled of rain, and for a moment, it felt like the world had come full circle. The stall owner looked at him and said softly, "You know, people will remember your story for a long time." He shook his head gently. "No, they'll remember the lesson, not me. And that's how it should be." The older man smiled knowingly. "Maybe, but every story needs a beginning, and then you were the beginning." As the rain began to fall lightly, he looked up at the gray sky and smiled. "Maybe so. But I think the ending belongs to everyone who kept it alive." In the years that followed, Lena grew into a young woman. She studied hard, always carrying the same kindness that once saved her. She became a teacher, not in a big school, but in a small community classroom for children who couldn't afford education. She often told them the story of the man and the rainy night. She never used his name, just as he preferred. But the children loved the story. To them it was like a fairy tale, a tale of a kind stranger who saw beyond the rain. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of his home, the man still kept the small white bowl. It sat on a shelf near his window, catching the morning sunlight. Sometimes he would look at it and smile, not because of what it meant to him, but because of what it had come to mean to the world. Every so often, he would receive letters from people across the country. Some wrote about feeding the homeless, some shared stories of helping strangers, others simply said thank you. Each one reminded him that the ripple he started was still spreading. One letter, written by a young boy, stood out. It said, "I heard your story from my teacher. I bought noodles for a man who was hungry. He cried and said thank you. I want to help more people when I grow up." The man read the letter slowly, his eyes warm with emotion. He whispered to himself, "That's what it's all about." Years later, when he passed away peacefully in his sleep, the city mourned quietly. There were no grand statues, no gold plaques, just stories shared from one person to another. People still gathered at the park every year to celebrate Kindness Day, lighting lanterns in memory of the man who had shown them that compassion could start anywhere, even in the middle of a storm. Lena, now grown, stood before the crowd one evening and spoke softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "He never wanted fame. He only wanted us to remember that being kind doesn't need a reason. It just needs a heart." The crowd lit their lanterns, letting them float into the sky. Thousands of small lights rose together, glowing softly against the dark night. It looked like the stars themselves had come down to listen, and somewhere, beneath that sky, the story lived on, passed from one heart to another, a gentle reminder that even one simple act of kindness could change the world forever. The rain had fallen once, but the warmth it left behind never faded.